BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Large numbers of demonstrators have taken to the streets of Paris after the government narrowly survived a no-confidence vote over its controversial pensions reforms. The vote was much closer than expected, just 9 short of the number needed to bring down the government. Bernadette Keogh has this report.
The outcome of the parliamentary vote prompted immediate anti-government protests in the centre of Paris, with demonstrators setting fire to bins and clashing with police, who used tear gas to clear some areas. More than 100 people were arrested in tense standoffs with security forces. Similar scenes were reported in other French cities, including Rennes, Dijon and Strasbourg, where protesters smashed the windows of a department store. The parliamentary vote was called by opposition parties after President Macron's administration decided to force through a rise in the pension age by 2 years last week without parliamentary approval.
United Nations climate scientists have warned that far more needs to be done to tackle global warming, as the key target of limiting temperature rises is likely to be missed in the early 2030s. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says the planet is on track to breach the threshold of 1.5 degrees centigrade. The Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, called the report a how-to guide for defusing the ticking time bomb of climate change.
It is a survival guide for humanity. As it shows, the 1.5 degree limit is achievable, but it will take a quantum leap in climate action. This report is a clarion call to massively fast-track climate efforts by every country and every sector and on every time frame.
Venezuela's oil minister Tarek El Aissami has resigned following the arrests of several executives of the state oil firm in connection with corruption allegations. Here's Mimi Swaby.
Mr. El Aissami tweeted his resignation and said he fully supported the investigation process. This follows the arrest of a mayor, 2 judges and several government officials. These are the latest arrests in an anti-corruption purge launched by President Nicolas Maduro last week. Mr. El Aissami has not been targeted himself, but many close to him have been detained. The move comes a year before presidential elections, in which Mr. Maduro, who's been in power for more than a decade, is expected to seek another term.
The International Monetary Fund has approved a $2.9 billion rescue package to help Sri Lanka out of an economic crisis. In return, the country has agreed to raise funds by restructuring state-owned enterprises and by privatising the national airline. You're listening to the World News from the BBC. A court in Washington has convicted 6 people linked to a far-right militia called the Oath Keepers of involvement in the storming of the US Congress 2 years ago. 4 of them were found guilty of the most serious charges of obstructing an official proceeding. 2 others were convicted of lesser charges. They were among thousands of Donald Trump supporters who tried to stop Congress from certifying Joe Biden's election win. A new study has found that more than 40,000 people may have died in Somalia last year as the country suffers its worst drought in recent years, compounded by political instability. The report by the Somali Health Ministry and the UN warns that the crisis is continuing, with deaths in the first 6 months of this year expected to reach between 20 and 30,000 if food supplies are not improved. There's been widespread condemnation of comments made by Israel's finance minister, who said there was no such thing as Palestinians. Bezalel Smotrich, a key figure in Israel's far-right governing coalition, made the remarks on Sunday at a conference in Paris. He said Arabs had invented a fictitious people in order to fight the Zionist movement. The EU's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, sharply criticised the comments.
I have to deplore this unacceptable comment by Minister Smotrich. It is wrong, it is disrespectful, it is dangerous, it is counterproductive to say these kinds of things in a situation which is already very tense.
The President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, says international donors have pledged $7 billion to help Turkey and Syria recover from last month's earthquake. She said the amount raised sent a strong signal of support. BBC News.